Hello, welcome back to Handle It Gaming. In this video, I thought it would be a good idea to cover, tanking in World of Warcraft. I've come across a lot of dungeons, just random dungeons, either mythic, regular, or just leveling, and I've seen a lot of people that tank, and oftentimes, they started out not so hot, and they, a lot of times they'll say, "Oh, I'm new to tanking," sorry if I suck, or if bear with me or whatever. So I thought I would make a video to maybe help correct that, and then see if hopefully encourage others to do tanking. Because a lot, for me at least, a big problem in Battle for Azeroth right now is finding tanks, and a lot of times you might end up waiting quite a while for a tank to queue up for something, if it's a regular dungeon, or if you're looking for tanks for raids, or mythics or whatever. It can take a while. So a few of the things that I want to cover in this video are confidence and communication, LOS, which is line of sight, and position. And keep in mind, this video is not geared towards teaching you how to tank this dungeon. This is more of like an in general type of a guide. So with some gameplay in the background, and towards the end there'll be some once we finish up, we'll kind of let it roll out, and you can just see the rest of the gameplay if you like. But anyways, so let's get into the first bit about it. Confidence. The big thing, going back to what I said in the beginning of the video, is confidence, and that goes back to tanks coming in saying, "Sorry if I suck." Well, that's not very. That's kind of discouraging whenever you do that. We all understand that people are new to the game, and everybody's trying to learn. But don't start your dungeon off like that. Be confident. Know your limitations. I mean, I'm sure you've been playing with your tank, going through quests, maybe you've done a couple of dungeons, whatever. But know your limitations. That's part of the biggest key of being confident with your ability to tank, and being able to choose how many things that you can pull at once, and whether or not it'll end up causing a wipe, and whether or not you can hold that aggro. And a lot of it has to do with your DPS and your heals. Some of them don't realize that while you're tanking, if you go for a bunch of trash pulls, just because you ran by them doesn't mean that you have like a ton of threat generated on those things. You've aggroed them, yes, but you don't have huge amount of threat. So it's important that your DPS knows, and this is for DPS out there as well, that you need to wait. Whenever your tank is pulling something, wait and give him the opportunity to start attacking, because that is when he's going to start he or she is going to start generating a bunch of threat towards those targets, but not off the bat. So it kind of makes it a little bit difficult when you're trying to bring together a bunch of mobs, big trash pulls, to help speed things up when and it just makes it a little bit difficult whenever you're trying to rally them all together. But going back, be confident though. Really figure out what your limitations are and what you can and can't pull, and then once you figure that out, go for it. And if you think you can go and maybe grab a few more, do it. But the four things that we're going to talk about in here kind of all work together to help you to become better at it in general. So then that kind of brings us to the next point is our communication. When you're in a dungeon, whether it's a mythic, whether it's a raid, whether you're just leveling and you're going through the game, and you're tanking, communicate with your teammates. Talk to them, tell them this is what I'm going to do, and then, or hopefully they'll follow your lead. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It's kind of hit and miss. In these low-level dungeons that I'm in right now, This is like the 90s crack, Draenor stuff. So, it's not a huge big deal, but, later on communicating is really, really important. And like right now, you'll want to communicate with them to say, hey, look, I was trying to do this, and this is why, or earlier, going through, and you'll see that the monk kind of throws a ring of peace down, and that spreads everything out that I try to pull, and that doesn't really help, because we're trying to do a group pull and we're trying to bring them all down as quickly as we can, and if it spreads them all out, that doesn't really help. But communicate that and say, hey, please don't do that, or but always chat, because you're not going to be able to go through and there's no voice communication typically with random dungeons, but in raids you're going to have that. Most really good raids, good well planned raids are going to have somebody that's organizing, setting up a Discord or whatever to go through the raid, and it's important that you communicate with your group members. And if you're a tank in a raid, oftentimes you're going to communicate with the off tank, or vice versa, and keeping that communication up between you two at the very least, very important, because oftentimes in a raid, it's going to require that one of you pull the threat off the boss at a certain moment. Maybe you've generated so many stacks of some terrible debuff, and you're like, well, okay, now it's my turn to swap that aggro, so that now he can get that debuff removed, and then I can start building up some of those stacks, and you just kind of go back and forth and rotate, and you coordinate that with with your tank. And the same thing with mythics. Tell everybody, hey, look, I'm going to do a lot of these pulls, and I'm going to do them a certain way, and please wait until I start attacking so that we can do it in a really efficient way. Because people in Mythics, Mythic Plus, whatever, they want to be efficient. Most people are trying to go through there and they're trying to knock out all the bosses, trying to knock out all the trash that's required for the Mythic Plus so that they can upgrade their keys. Nobody wants to be in a Mythic for very long. Well, at least I don't think. Sometimes, pugging dungeons and raids can be brutal enough as it is. So, make it as pleasant as possible. But that brings us to the next bit, line of sight. Line of sight is like one of the most important things for me personally, for tanking. If you see that a lot throughout this video here, is I am taking large groups of these trash pulls, and I'm taking large groups of them, and I'm going and hugging a wall somewhere, or I'm going behind a pillar to line of sight the enemy. And whenever you line of sight the enemy, an enemy has to be able to attack you line of sight. So if you line of sight them, you go out of their line of sight, and it forces them to come to you. And that's what you want. You want to bring all of those guys right on top of you. They're sitting in your whatever aura you have to damage them, some AoE or whatever. You want to bring them close, because that keeps the dungeon efficient. You're knocking out as many enemies as you can with AoE and direct attacks, whatever. And if they're all spread out, it just takes longer, because then you have to end up going towards one at a time. But it's important. Line of sight only really works if your group members are not attacking the targets before you have a chance to. And you see that here. And again, I communicate that, saying, hey, please wait until I stop. Wait until I stop, wait until I start attacking, that kind of thing, so that before you do. Because as soon as some DPS starts attacking and I'm trying to pull, rally up a bunch of these mobs, it messes up the aggro. And so what we have here is like, we've got all these other ones grouped up together, but then we got this one straggler that's sitting back there. Then we have to go and take care of that, and it just slows things down. Is it a huge deal in this particular dungeon? No. Does it get it to be a big deal later on? I mean, yeah, again, it just comes back to mythics and you know, progression in the game. But always, you know, keep that in mind, you know, because line of sight's everywhere. It's pretty much in most of these dungeons, and you know, use it to your advantage. Bring them all together, you know, and you know, keep in mind too that though you're bringing everything together, that runs the risk that there's going to be some, you know, AOE crap that's going to be on the ground. So you want to obviously do your best to stay off of that. You know, in this dungeon here, wasn't a huge deal. The stuff doesn't, you know, I got a nice, you know, nice tank here. He doesn't really take a whole lot of damage. You know, going through this entire dungeon, I don't really use a whole lot of my defensive cooldowns at all. Had a pretty good healer, but you know, I mean, the healer was just, you know, switching over to DPS there for a while because, you know, he doesn't really need to heal me, and that's nice because then that's just one other, you know, little bit of DPS. But then the last thing that we'll talk about is position, and this part is also really, really important, especially when you're doing those large group pulls. Is how you're placing yourself. So wherever you're placing yourself, the enemies are going to be facing you. So you want to try to position yourself in a way that your DPS is not really facing either the boss, and they're not facing the trash mobs that, you know, are pulling. Because you know, as many know and some don't, that if you attack the boss or the trash from behind, it ignores all their defenses. So that's the general idea there. Position yourself in a way that helps your teammates to maximize their DPS. You know, and a lot of times you can't, and so you have to, you know, this is for your DPS. Make sure that you are always trying to stay behind the trash or the boss. That way, you know, the boss doesn't have that opportunity to maybe block or dodge, you know, some of your attacks, and you don't want that because then that affects your DPS and slows down the fight. And you know, in mythics, it can get kind of rough the longer the fight goes. In raids, it definitely can get really rough if the fight lasts too long, because then, you know, the boss is in rage, and pretty much at that point everybody's gonna die, depending on the health, of course. So other than that, you know, if you guys have questions, if you want to, you know, pick up my brain a little bit, I'm going to be making some more videos with healing, probably some DPS videos as well. There's really not much to cover with DPS. It's pretty straightforward, you know, but, you know, I'll probably go into that later on if that's something that you guys would like. But healing is definitely going to be the next one. I've, you know, come across the same, you know, similar problems, you know, with tanking as well with healing. You know, some healers come in and say the same exact stuff. I'm new to healing. Bear with me, you know, all that kind of stuff, and that's cool. You know, we're all learning. But you know, again, maybe a video like this might help. And you know, if it does, let me know. If it doesn't, you know, also, you know, have questions, you know, throw them in the comments. Greatly appreciate any sort of feedback whatsoever. Other than that, here's the rest of the video. Enjoy.